There's still things that could go wrong, but the basic structure of the deal, I think, is in place. Whether it can survive till Friday at the signing, I will still have some doubts about. Well, you're certainly right to say we've had a number of these before. I think somebody counted some 37 over the weekend where there's been a deal about to be signed. I mean, I think to be fair, on this occasion, there's been a significant amount of behind the scenes scurrying around, and the principal powers concerned, the Qataris and Pakistanis, this time seem to be much more hopeful this actually will come about. So that's the kind of the background to it. I think what's kind of brought it to this stage where it looks more likely than not is two things. First of all, is domestic and international pressure on President Trump. You've got the whole issue of the effect on people's economies, indeed the effect of his own domestic economy, which also exists. But I wouldn't ignore the pressure on Iran as well. You'll recall about 2 weeks ago, there was a flurry of attacks and counterattacks and responses from there. Most Iranian responses either fell short or were ineffective, whereas the Israeli and American responses back into Iran were effective. I think that's kind of that's the difference. So they begin to interfere as well. Two attacks in particular. The Americans attacked the waterworks, the water supply of two small towns, and at the height of summer in Iran, they recognised what the threat could be from there. So I think there was a difference of shift in tone and understanding amongst the Iranian as to where the next phase would go if we ended up with kind of full scale war from there. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet, though. I have to say, Simon, two things could actually knock this off track completely. The first, what happens in the Lebanon, because one of the things the Iranians have been insistent upon is that there'll be a ceasefire deal in the Lebanon as well for their major proxy, who are Hezbollah, who are very much led, mentored, or equipped by from there. But that's not acceptable, particularly to the Israelis. So some sort of kind of deal with the Israelis is also important. And you've also got Hezbollah as an actor in its own right, because for them, the only power, the only authority comes from what they're able to do against Israel. So it's quite possible that this deal could be derailed by what happens in the Lebanon as well as what is clearly a less than centrally controlled Iranian military as well. Some of the issues we've had recently have been where local Iranian commanders have fired on American vessels or vessels they say are breaking through the blockade, and that's then produced a sort of counter response from there. So there's still things that could go wrong. But the basic structure of the deal, I think, is in place. Whether it can survive till Friday and the signing, I will still have some doubts about. Yeah, the threats are real, and what they have done is they put in place the troops to make it so. Particularly the challenge of taking Karg Island, though it's an obvious response that the Iranians would react to that. So there is that side of it as well. Whether it would actually change things, I don't know. But they have brought in since the attack started in February, they brought in a significantly number more of force elements who could participate in such an attack if required from there. So I think the threats are regarded as real threats by the Iranians. But the kind of political will and the political consequences of, for example, putting boots on the ground in Iran are so massive that they can also perhaps rely on caution, at least, on President Trump and the US military side as to whether or not they do something about it or not. That's a big move to actually go and seize Karg Island. I think that's really one of the major questions around that. I think in the first instance, they'll be happy just to get a sort of 60-day ceasefire in place. The Strait of Hormuz opened, and to some extent, they'll push the issue down the line. While President Trump was very rude about the idea which President Obama produced in 2014 and condemned it as a bad deal, indeed removed it when he came to power, and so Trump 001. I think what we're heading for is something not dissimilar to what Obama had in place, where there's a kind of recognition that Iran has every right to conduct research, but it can't produce nuclear weapons. And it's a bit about not producing nuclear weapons, which will be the hard thing to try and establish that goes with it. How will they achieve the monitoring? To some extent, they might try and use the International Atomic Energy Authority, but they may look for a third party or even their own inspectors to look at, which will probably be anathema to the Iranians themselves. There's also the issue of the sort of 420 kilos of currently highly enriched uranium, which is something which I think will be part of the negotiation. And there have been various conversations about that being removed, that being put beyond all safe use. here perhaps an analogy is what happened to the IRA's weapons, where they were put beyond use, and maybe that's what you end up doing. So some kind of deal like that. But I think the detail of that, I think, has been pushed into the 60-day ceasefire period, which I would expect, if it comes to power, to be extended. And as I say, it took 2 years for President Obama to negotiate the last, if you like, restriction on Iran's enrichment program. I think that's what we're looking at seriously, realistically, for this one as well. Has Iran effectively, is he going to throw away 47 years of its foreign policy because of what's happened? I think that's probably less clear. And the role and power of the IRGC has effectively been greatly enhanced by the way in which the attacks took place and what actually happened to Iran. So Iran always had this rather strange structure. It had a government, even a parliament, that didn't look very different to governments and parliaments in other parts of the world. But it had this kind of theocratic structure in place, reinforced and monitored by the IRGC. Now, they had the when they had the decapitation strikes right at the very beginning of the campaign, that removed a whole layer of the kind of civil government from there. And that allowed the IRGC to take much more control than they had previously. So they're not going anywhere. And one of the other reasons they're not going anywhere very fast is the grip they've got on the Iranian economy. It's like 40% of the Iranian economy has got direct IRGC involvement. So, trying to extract them from that is going to be very hard going forward as well. So I think there is a challenge from there. My sense at the moment is that what Trump wants, and indeed what the Iranians want, is effectively a sort of short-term fix to get us over the summer, to get the oil flowing for both countries, because Iran is also suffering in terms of its oil reserves and revenues. Get the oil flowing again. That will deflate some of the criticism that's directed at President Trump, both in his own domestic audience, but also from international partners, and give him some sort of semblance that he's going to brought the Iranians to a negotiating table, which he might then try and be able to spin as a victory in this particular war and campaign. Long term, I think the structural issues that led to this conflict won't necessarily have disappeared. And so this could just be one of those kind of extended pauses of the ceasefire, which could take years, but then the structural issues have not yet been challenged. Yeah, so if it collapsed and collapsed in a way that it couldn't survive, and I think we should expect, as we've had with the previous ceasefire, that there'll be, to use Shakespearean term, alarms and excursions. There will be things that go wrong. This is a very fragile ceasefire and a very febrile part of the world. So I don't expect it to be a kind of 100% ceasefire, and that's kind of the end of the fighting. I don't think it'll be like that at all. But if it collapsed completely, there could be some kind of resumption of hostilities, which would maybe have another kind of round of tit for tat of attacks and responses, and then probably a reversion to again some kind of negotiated settlement. I think both sides want to kind of pause, or at least an end to this. Whether we get it or not, I think is still very much moot.